Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good afternoon. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next 2 hours here on Radio Hamra. Studio number to call in 310-441-0555. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, so you can call in with any questions related to clinical psychology, including any emotional or psychological issues, parenting issues, and relationship issues as well. You can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram or like my page on Facebook to get updates on the show or suggest topics or books for the program. And the shows are uploaded at the end of each week to my SoundCloud page and podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Again, our studio number 310-441-0555. The book of the week for this week is The Life You Can Save by Peter Singer. The Life You Can Save, How to Do Your Part to End World Poverty by Peter Singer. And I came across this book as I was reflecting on animal rights, animal cruelty, and my own journey or experience of what I wanted to do in regards to what I consumed. And I mentioned this on Monday's show, I think during the live, Instagram live, so I don't know if it was on the air, but that I have decided to be vegan starting Sunday, or this past Sunday, going forward, and still have a lot to learn and understand and research. But I wanted to start that process because I felt like it was the right thing to do. I might talk about it some more, even today, but especially going forward, of my own experience. Last week, you might recall, I was a contemplating carnivore, still eating meat, but thinking about if that's the right thing to do. And so after further reflection over the next few days after that and the weekend, I came to that conclusion that I wanted to go forward as or plant-based. I also have to still understand what all these different terms mean because they have more implications than sometimes we realize. But anyway, so I decided to be plant-based, and I'm still considering and looking at the impact I'm having on the world, and of course we have on the world and different creatures and the earth and all of those things that I think is very important. As I mentioned last week, usually I was trying not to think about those things, but once I was faced with it, I realized I didn't want to look away. And so I came across Peter Singer actually in researching authors and books and writers who talk about animal cruelty and animal rights and things related to these issues. And then I saw this book, The Life You Can Save, and was really drawn to it. And I'm really just read a few pages of the introduction, but I can see that it's going to be pretty impactful. It seems like it can have that potential, and I'm really excited to read it and share it with you on next Monday's show. I also ordered a book of his that's coming out in a few months about, I think it was called it's about being vegan or eating ethically, something like that, but it's not even out yet. But I pre-ordered it because I was pretty excited to check it out. So again, Peter Singer, The Life You Can Save, How to Do Your Part to End World Poverty. And I'll start with something related to that in a way, not necessarily focused on world poverty, but the book covers something I think, a concept called effective altruism. But essentially, we can think about how much we're doing to help others, and how really all of us can do more. Of course, me very much included. And of course, others can include people, but also animals as well. But we all can do more, and we don't, even though sometimes what we can do might be fairly simple for us or doesn't involve much of a sacrifice, but we still don't do much. And of course, individuals can do so much, or they can do a lot, but of course, the governments and society at large can have a much bigger impact. But what I wanted to talk about is when we think about what we're doing and why we do it, and also when we try to figure out what our legacy will be. You'll hear this a lot in interviews with people that might be celebrities or prominent figures. They'll say, how would you like to be remembered, or what do you want your legacy to be? And of course, this can be asked to really anyone. We ask that question. How would you like to be remembered by friends and family? And it can be a good way to reorient ourselves or refocus ourselves on the things that really matter. Because it's very easy to get caught up in trying to get attention and approval and money and fame and some of these things that are these external reinforcers that I am good. But usually, when people think about what they want to be remembered for or the impact they want to have, it's generally more about being kind to others, loving to others, especially to family members, to close friends, expressing that love, that gratitude in different ways, not holding it in, wishing they spent more time with people they care about. So it can be good for us to think about that. How would you like to be remembered? But it was making me reflect on this. I talked to my brother Powerhome last night. We had a conversation that spanned a lot of different topics, but this issue also came up of how we want to be remembered or have a legacy in which people remember us for being good and where this might come from. And I think partially we can look at it as some way of wanting to perpetuate the self, me. And we all know we have that ego, if you want to call it that, or that sense of self that makes us think we are something and someone, and we have a real strong vested interest to first make sure we survive, but also from an evolutionary perspective, and that evolution affects our psychology as well, of having our genes be passed on so that we keep going forward. Really, in a lot of ways, that's what we're designed to do at some basic level, is to survive and, more importantly, pass our genes forward. That's a big biological drive, and of course it ties into our psychology as well. And so we have this sense of self, which in some ways is an illusion, how much we think it's so important. Me. We can get so tied up in this. And yes, we have to make sure we're okay and make sure we survive. But in some ways, it could take on this literally and pun intended, larger than life kind of a feeling that it's so important what happens to me and how I'm remembered or what happens in my present and future. We can be fooled into thinking it's more important than it really is. Because it's funny to think about when we want to have a legacy. Usually, we're not just talking about a legacy of our impact, it's a legacy of being remembered. We don't want to be forgotten, because in that way, it seems like we're never dead. We're still alive, or we're being passed on and passed down. And we can understand that impulse and desire, but of course, we won't be there to experience that. Now, of course, you might say, if you believe in an afterlife and what that afterlife is like, and if you're watching the world, but then also in that afterlife, what would you think? You still have these same feelings and emotions you have in this life or this physical body? I mean, there's so many, obviously no one really knows, but you can have your beliefs about that. But really, you're not experiencing what's happening with your legacy. Do people keep saying, so-and-so was a great man or a great woman, and we name this after them or name that after them? We can get attached to being remembered more than what we would hope we focus on is having a positive impact. If we think it's good to help other people, we should focus more on helping others rather than the recognition of it. And we all have this impulse. Of course, we'd like to hear people say, oh, we know that so-and-so did this or helped people in that way. Everyone has that feeling of pride they get, or that good feeling of reinforcement we get when people tell us we were good or a good person. So we can acknowledge that, but we try to be aware of what our intention is, what's driving us. And it made me think of this, in a way, thought experiment, where if you ask yourself and ask people, would you rather have a positive impact on more people or be remembered, or for people to think of you as someone that's helped more people? And I think for a lot of us, unfortunately, and at least in different moments, we might actually prefer the latter, to be remembered as someone great. For people to say, so-and-so helped so many people and has changed lives and has made the world a better place in X, Y, and Z way. And of course, that can feel good. We can understand that. But it's almost sad to think we would prefer that over, what if you helped a lot of people and you continue to have an impact that was positive on people's lives, but people didn't know? People didn't realize that you were the one, or you don't get remembered, or it gets lost in history, but you're helping people currently while you're alive, but it has this impact going forward. We would hope that that would be more of our driver because morally we think it's the right thing rather than being remembered, which really has no value to even really you after you've died, but to society to have you remembered in some way doesn't have any impact. But if you can, let's say, cure a disease that continues to cure people or change some kind of policy in the world that makes it so that less people are struggling in some way, and that goes forward, we would hope that would be our driving force. So it's something we want to look at in our own lives. What am I doing? What impact am I having? I understand, and I can understand all of us should recognize it feels good to get that reinforcement, to be told you're doing good, to be recognized for being a good person. We can get that. But always look at your intention. What's driving you? What's really making you do what you do and what you don't do? What makes you help others in the way that you do or not help them? We all know that if people are watching us, of course, we're going to act kinder to people. If I tell you there's a video camera following you around right now and it's being broadcast around the world, well, you're going to be on your quote unquote best behavior if that's happening. We get that. We're human beings who will care about those things. And also taking a step back, it's easy to say don't care what other people think. And I'm not trying to say that because as human beings, we know we do care and we definitely should care at some level. And caring about what people think comes from this survival space that we need others to survive. We are social beings. If you were living in your ancestral environment and were kicked out of your group, it could literally mean you would die. So social rejection and being ostracized is equivalent to death. So of course we're going to be sensitive to that or have that in our psychological wiring, so to speak, to care about being rejected and also care a lot about being accepted and praised and acknowledged for good things. So again, we can understand these drives and these emotions, but we also are not a slave to these emotions and drives. We can be people will sometimes say, oh, from an evolutionary perspective, this is why maybe we cheat or are unfaithful. So maybe it's in our wiring, and somehow making it seem that if it's wired that we might benefit from infidelity for some evolutionary reasons, then we're doomed to do it. We have no control over it, which is definitely not the case. We are wired for lots of things, or we're definitely living in an environment that is different than the environment that our brains evolved in. And so there will be these mismatches, but it doesn't mean we're doomed to do those things that we think we might have an inclination towards, or there's some explanation for why we might do it. No, you can choose not to be unfaithful, just like you can choose not to eat sugary foods and fatty foods, even though for our ancestors those were rare to find. So if they found them, they would have a lot of them. But it doesn't mean we have to have them in those same quantities that they would if they had access to it. We can be aware of our inclinations and some things that maybe even drive us in some ways, but don't have to give in to them. And so similarly, we can understand our desire to be accepted in certain ways and be remembered and be looked at in a certain way and be preoccupied with what people think of us more than what our actions actually are and what we're doing. We can really take a closer look at what we're doing in our life and not doing and come to terms with the fact that this is a feeling that it feels good to get that reinforcement, but I don't want that to be my driving force. I would rather be someone who helps people and it might not be seen more than someone who gets remembered for it or focus on that. And we're all victims to this right now. Even on social media, this even becomes an issue. And I even struggle with it myself, where I've seen people trying to find this balance. If you're doing something good to help others, do you broadcast it to the world? On one hand, it's going to make you look good, and that could be the driving force. But on the other hand, sometimes it could be coming from a good place that you want people. We know that human beings were very contagious when it comes to behavior. So if you see people doing bad things, it can make it more likely to do bad things. If you see people being kind, that can also be contagious. So there could be that positive impact of posting these things where people are doing good things and posting it about yourself so that other people say, oh, look, so and so is doing it. Maybe that encourages me to act better too. Just like if people post videos of themselves exercising, it might make it more likely that others will exercise because they get motivated and inspired and also see that others are doing it and encourages them to get involved. So it has that aspect. And then the second positive aspect of posting things like that is that oftentimes it brings awareness to certain issues. Someone goes to feed the homeless, and it reminds people and makes us very aware of the homeless situation that we, for example, have in the United States, and that people are living in these kinds of conditions. And you might want to yourself get involved because of that. So it makes it so we don't avoid those issues, or it makes it that we can't ignore or neglect them if we're face to face with them. So, like many things, it's not that it's good or bad to post something about doing something altruistic, but we always want to be aware of our intentions of what is it that's making me do this? Why am I posting this? What am I trying to get or accomplish or give in this process? And usually it's not very black and white. There's usually a lot more gray area, but we always have to check in with ourselves. But it's a reminder that this sense of self that we have is very powerful. It can feel so real that you can be in pain, which is always a value to be attended to, but you might think it's equal to someone who's suffering in a much bigger way because you're feeling your own pain viscerally and emotionally. You might try to have empathy or sympathy for someone else, but it will never feel as strong. And so we can be fooled to think that something we're going through might be more important than what someone else is going through. Of course, only we can attend to ourselves, but we don't want to lose sight of people who are suffering in ways that are much greater than ours, and making sure we don't neglect those people and fool ourselves in thinking my suffering might be worse because I feel it more. And we want to be aware of how, when we're helping others, our impact is more important than how we are remembered. That we want to be aware of this tendency to care more about how we're remembered or what people think of us. Let's go to a commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. You're listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Studio number 310-441-0555. Had some technical difficulties during the commercial break. Had to restart the computer, and I think I'm back on. I hope I am, and I think we have a line. So let's go to that. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, hi. Thanks for calling.
Hi, thank you for speaking with me.
Sure.
I really appreciate it. I have a question about my son. I have two kids. I have a son that's 2 and a daughter that's like 1.5. So my son's 2.5, my daughter's 1.5. And my husband and I don't know if this is even related, but we had both of our kids during our residency training, and I know it was a hard time for both of them. They were raised by the nanny, and we would be gone a lot for long hours. But I've noticed he has a lot of anxiety. I think it's a little more than the average 2-year-old tantrums. I know the terrible twos. His is more, I would say, anxious episodes where I think it's also related to any time you switch, you're transitioning from one thing to the next. Like in the morning, if you're transitioning from sleep to getting ready, or at night, you're transitioning from being downstairs to going upstairs. I see that he gets anxious, and and these anxiety episodes manifest themselves in different ways. Sometimes he self-soothes by, biting his nails. Sometimes he wants to eat a lot. Sometimes he'll have a huge, terrible tantrum and can't be soothed easily. Sometimes he's hitting us. I'm not sure exactly how to navigate it, especially since he's 2, you can't really talk to him much. You can't. So I was hoping you could shed some light on how much damage I might have done.
It's funny. A lot of parents start that way. They say, "Have I damaged my kids?" And I think actually last week someone said almost the same kind of phrase. And we all get damaged in childhood. It's part of what we experience. No one comes out of childhood unscathed, but we want to look at what's going on and understand it better. And the reason why I also start with that is that as a parent, we want to be aware of the guilt we carry, because that if we're dealing with it and not able to really deal with it, will affect how we treat our child. Because if you, let's say,
Right.
feel guilty that, oh, I've done this to my kid, then when your child acts out in that way because it's a reminder of your quote unquote wrongdoing, you'll almost want to stop the child from expressing that feeling, or might put that pressure to not feel that way because it makes you feel bad. So it makes sense that you have feelings about what your child is going through and what potentially you and your husband have put your children through or what they've experienced, but it's something to be mindful
Right.
of. Carrying that guilt into your interactions with the child could actually
Very true.
impact the pressure on them. But you mentioned, first of all, your kids are very close in age, so
Yeah.
your older child, the 2.5, really was still a baby
Sorry,
when the new one came.
he's closer to, he's almost going to be 3 in like 3
Three.
months.
Okay.
So
Okay.
he's, yeah, yeah,
Okay, so just a little over a year or so, I guess,
yeah.
difference, but still very, very young. And you were saying how you and your husband were in residency and busy, and so there's a lot of this not being around so much, and so there's an instability there. Children, of course,
Right.
themselves have a disposition that they are born with, or temperament that they have, so they can be more, a little bit more anxious or sensitive to begin with, but then what they experience, of course, will have an impact as well. And so it's tough. You're saying he's soothing in some ways that I think also concern you, like biting his nails or wanting to eat a lot. And this could
Yeah.
be, yeah. And so obviously a lot of things are going on, but he might not have had that consistent soothing from one of you that he probably wanted or needed. And so we're still going to have to help him internalize that more. And we're all still learning, even as adults, how to be better at soothing ourselves or dealing with our feelings in healthy ways, or ways that are more adaptive than others. So we want to help him with that. And you're saying he's hitting and he's maybe doing things that are aggressive. We want to try our best to be there with him as he goes through this. And you're right, verbally, there's so much he'll understand, but even in your voice, and just try to be as calm as possible, as hard as that can be, I'm sure, when he's tantruming like that, and really show him that you are there as long as he needs you, as long as he's going through this. What's sad and understandable, though, is that a lot of parents, when when the kid tantrums or acts out, they send them away and say, get away from
Right.
me, or send them to timeout because they think using it as a punishment. And really, timeout was developed more, and its intention is to be something that helps a child soothe. It's not a punishment, but it's actually, what, you're getting riled up or maybe having too big of feelings. Let's see if we can step away and calm down and then return back to whatever it is we're doing. Not, you're being bad, go to your room, and then you're in
So
timeout.
don't phrase it as a punishment. Just put him aside and talk him through it, or should we leave the room? I
It
just,
well depends. I think it's not. Yeah, it's good. I would say we want to see what he seems to want. And at his age, 2.5, probably he'll want you around. Now, even I
yeah,
know
he
it could be
does.
strange. Yeah, he might, and it can also feel weird. He wants you, but he's hitting you, and you're kind of. Seems paradoxical, but he's just overwhelmed with feelings.
Yeah.
He's hurt, but he's upset. He might be even upset with you, but of course he relies on you. So in that moment, he's mad at you and might act out, but still wants you to hold him. And it's just the feelings are too big for him to deal with, and he's trying to make his way through them. And that's why having you and his father with him is what we want to do, is to help him, show him it's going to be okay, make him feel okay, really make sure we don't make him feel abandoned in that moment when he's so
Okay.
emotional. Because especially what we send the message indirectly to our kids when we do this is, when you need me the most, I'm there for you the least. When parents send the kid away when they're so emotional, and we
Yeah.
get it because it's an uncomfortable situation, it's hard to deal with, but we're giving them that message. So I would suggest being with him as much as possible. I get it that it seems like it's bringing up this anxiety in you of, wait, is this too much? His tantrums, is his anxiety too much?
Right.
And it
Yeah.
could be, I'm not saying his anxiety, I know it's in a normal range or it's okay, but more than anything, wherever it's at, he needs most from you guys to give him that stability and consistency. The analogy I sometimes use is, when someone is so hot, we try to make them cold, of course, but we have to slowly get them there, meaning that we have to be with them, and we, as a maybe calming force, slowly will get him there, and he'll start to realize over time that it will pass, it will be better. My parents are here, they're not going anywhere. And you might already have some feelings of, anxiety, separation anxiety, abandonment anxiety because of what you described earlier. And so
Yeah.
it's not about the damage necessarily, but it's a recognizing that we want to continue to reconnect with him as best as we can, and we don't want to make him feel bad for his tantrums, which can be tough. It's not to say that we want to say they're good, but we want to approach them more from the mindset that he's having these big feelings that he doesn't know what to do
Kind
about
of
them,
process,
not he's
right?
acting out. Yeah.
Right. So the question is, like, for instance, he becomes really habitual easily. Like, you do something one time in a routine and it sticks, like drinking milk at bedtime, which isn't good for his teeth, or like, laying down with him and he doesn't sleep, bedtime turns into a 3-hour ordeal. So how do you suggest I navigate that? Because, like, for instance, last night he wanted me to lay down with him, and I did for like 10, 15 minutes, but then I had to go and get ready, like, for work. So, I left, but he wanted me to stay. So, sorry, actually, I'm at the hospital. But
That's
do you
okay.
recommend I give in to that because of what I described in the past, or do you think I should kind of just,
Yeah.
I don't know when to, like, just put my foot down and kind of be the disciplinary person versus the emotional given and, like,
Right.
giver of attention,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is a gray area. There's no, this is when you put your foot down for sure. This is when you don't. As you're describing him, kids in general like routine. We all like routines, but if he does have more anxiety, he could be even more get connected to those. The routines might be soothing for him. So we want to
Right.
come up with healthy routines that are healthy and consistent. So by consistent, I mean, you guys can do every night, because as you're saying, if your work schedule or things are happening where you can't do it, we don't want them to get used to something and then we can't do it. That's going to create even more anxiety. So trying to find routines for him, especially during transitions, especially whatever brings up anxiety for him. Let's say if it's bedtime or going somewhere, the more routines you can have, it's probably going to be better. As far as when do you give in, it's tough. We always want to be firm but flexible, which sounds really nice,
Right.
but executing it is a lot harder to do, because in the moment it's like, well,
So
is this where I'm
hard.
supposed to be firm or is this where I'm supposed to be flexible? So if your kid is really upset, that sometimes we set a boundary, we say we have to stick to that boundary, but sometimes we see they're so distraught and upset that it could be hurtful if we just abandon them or stay too firm. And so I can't really give you that exact answer, but I would again go back to that feeling of guilt that comes up where, like you said, because of what we've done, I want to now maybe give him more or extra.
Right.
And of course, you want to give him more love, but sometimes we have to be aware that love might involve setting some structure or boundaries as well, and trying to find that balance is important. So I hope you and your husband can come up with the routines and ways of being there for him, seeing that maybe you have a child that's more anxious. The consistency will be even more important for him, especially because he maybe didn't get that consistency as much as he needed as ages 0 to 1, and then after that the sister arrived and that changed the dynamics
I
too.
know.
So
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
so he's gonna, he likes everyone likes routine. He might be more attracted to them because of the anxiety that he wants to know what to expect. Even when kids play things like peekaboo or hide and go seek, adults sometimes get baffled. When a kid plays hide and go seek, sometimes they tell you where to hide, and for us it's like, well, doesn't that ruin the game? Isn't the whole point of the game to hide and someone has to find you? But a lot of things, like the games like hide and go seek, it's actually about hellos and goodbyes and surprises and having control over that you're going to go there, and when I want to come see you, I get to come find you and see you when I want to. It gives them that power, because we can imagine as a child it's scary and unpredictable. Like, mom is here, then mom's gone, and they don't know about schedules and days and routines of days in the week that we have, and so it obviously impacts them in a
Exactly.
way that we can't understand. So, I can hear that you're also at the hospital, and I
Yeah.
want to not
Sorry.
take more of your. No, that's okay. We don't have to take too much more time, but it's challenging. I would just say be mindful of, we're gonna have to continue internalizing in your son this sense of peace and soothing that will take some time, but more than anything, it will require you guys to give him that warmth and show him you're available, so he can create a more secure attachment to you and your husband that If I need a stable base, I have it. And over time, that'll allow him to get more comfortable to explore, and finding that balance of course, encouraging him to explore, but making sure he knows he has that base always there to come back to. And it's going to take time
Right.
because it wasn't probably established as strongly as it needed to be. But
Yeah,
we
I
don't want
agree.
to focus just on
I
that
mean,
past, but focus on what we can do now.
can I just ask you one quick question about
Sure.
the habit stuff, like the nail biting and the drinking milk all night? Like, what do you do with that? Do you put your foot down, or do you say, like the nail
Yeah.
biting? I have no idea what to do. I guess it's normal for some 2.5-year-olds, but the drinking milk all night, I think it's more of a soothing thing. Do we give into it, or do we not?
Well,
I don't know.
the milk thing. I mean, the health and the for his, I guess, teeth, and I don't know what else. It's probably not a good idea. But he is giving us all these messages that it's hard for me to stay calm. Biting
Right.
nails, yes, some kids do it, and I don't know, of course, the degree to what he's doing, but that gives us that sense, and we don't want to make him feel bad about biting his nails. We want to see how we can support him. He's biting his nails because he's stressed out and he's trying to soothe himself, which might point to the fact that he didn't get the soothing he needed as much before. And so we're going to have to try
Yeah.
to help him with that. Okay, maybe if we hold him and, kind of massage or pet his back or see what we can do to get him away from it. Not to say biting your nails is bad or you're bad for biting your nails, but we do want to help him to see that there's other ways that we can try to stay calm, relax with him. The drinking the milk all night, yeah, and even the putting your foot down, I get the terminology, but of course we're always approaching it from a place of love. Even if we take the milk away, it's not because we're putting our foot down because you can't do this. It's we know that this is actually going to hurt you, even though I understand it feels good to you now. So we're going to see how we can work with that to give you the best love we can. What is the most loving way? So it's not that you're trying to deprive him or take away love. In that moment, it could feel
Okay.
that way to him, even if you decided to do that. But just that
Right.
mindset is everything is coming from a place of love. We're not trying to hurt him in any way. We do recognize at times we might not give him what he wants in that exact moment because we can see it's not as good for him in a bigger picture way. And then we find a way to do that in a loving way as well. But always we're coming from this place of what's the most loving thing to help him both now, but also as he's a growing boy to give him the best, experience and environment he can have. So I just think we're clearly we have, and the thing is, as much as I'm saying, try to get him to internalize this, give him this feeling, more than likely he'll be an anxious kid and then an anxious teenager and an anxious adult. I'm not saying for sure, and I don't want to label him,
Oh
but he might be
God.
more prone. Okay, maybe I should have said it that way. What I mean is that he might have some anxiety that could be something he
Right.
deals with. And so I don't want you to think we're going to just get it out of him and it's going to go away. It could, maybe once he gets more secure with you guys and feels more calm, it will become much less and become a non-issue. I'm not saying it has to be, but my point is that the way you're describing him, it seems to be some of his temperament. Doesn't mean it can't become less, but it seems like there's something there. So I also say that so we don't get too alarmed if he shows some signs of anxiety or sensitivity as he gets older. That can be okay too. We want to help him, but we want to make sure in helping him, we're not trying to make him feel like this part of you is bad or this part of you we have to get rid of. We want to
Right.
help him so he feels better and feels good. But I was just throwing that out there so you're aware that it's possible. And I don't want you to think part of it could be his temperament. So when we go forward, I don't want you to think, oh, see, my kid is kind of anxious. That's our fault that we did this when he was a baby or something. I don't want that guilt to be there constantly because, again, that's going to put pressure on you and then pressure on him to not be maybe the way he is. And we don't want to give him that
I
feeling.
see. No, I get it. Thank you so much for all
Sure.
your
Nice
advice. I
talking to you.
really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Great talking to you. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye. All right, let's go to another commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Studio number 310-441-0555. So the previous caller had some really good questions about their child and what they were going through, and wanted to follow up or continue on that because parenting is, as I always say, the hardest job we can have as human beings, as far as the responsibility, the impact, and also all the unknowns and things that are happening that make it so challenging. And as I talked to her, I was saying, oh, being firm but flexible sounds really good. And I think it is the appropriate mindset to have or approach For example, when you create boundaries, you're firm, you want to be consistent, but of course there's some level of flexibility you want to have too. If your child has a bedtime of 8 p.m., and they're waiting to see grandma, and grandma gets stuck in traffic and shows up at 7:55, to say, well, you have to see grandma for 5 minutes and fall asleep, is probably being a little bit, first of all, unrealistic, but also unreasonable and pretty mean to your child as well. So we want to be aware of being flexible yet being firm, and what that means is hard, and there's no limit to say this is exactly when it's time to put your foot down, as the caller had said, or this is where you need to give in. And that's what makes it challenging as a parent, to not know, when am I supposed to do this or that. It would feel really good if there was some clear recipe or rule book that told you exactly what to do at each moment. But there isn't. And on top of that, as a parent, you're dealing with stressful in the moment situations. I'm sitting here and it's very easy to say, oh, do this, and this sounds like the right approach, or you could have said that, or you could have done that. After the fact, and also out of the situation, it's very easy to give advice or to say things that might sound as better or could have been done that were not done. But when you're in the moment, you're stressed, especially as parents. Very often, as parents of younger children especially, you're sleep deprived and tired and going through all sorts of things, and your own life stressors, marital stuff that's there, so many things that are going on. It can make it a lot harder to expect for us to just keep our cool in all those moments, or to be able to think everything through so completely. And then on top of that, these fears of, what if I damage my child, or hurt my child, or scar my child, or ruin their life, or even more extreme and catastrophic ways that people might start to feel about the impact they can have. And so this creates even more pressure on us in that environment, which can make it really difficult. But one aspect I wanted to touch on in this segment with that follow-up was that feeling of guilt that can come from that, and that parents can have about what they've done to their kids or how they've hurt them. And as I was saying to the mother that was calling, being aware and mindful of our own feelings. Because as a parent, we have to be so conscious of the fact and so mindful of the fact that if we don't deal with our feelings, and also in general, if we don't deal with our issues, consciously or unconsciously, we're going to pass those on to our kids. That's just how it's going to be. So you can think, oh no, I don't let it affect my kid, or I totally keep it separate. A lot of times parents will tell me, oh yeah, we fight, but it doesn't affect the kids at all. Or we're not close at all anymore, but we never let it affect the kids. And the kids are like sponges picking up the emotional environment of your home. So they're feeling all those things. They feel conflict and they feel lack of love. You can't just hide it from them because you think they didn't hear it or they don't see it, or you pretend in some way. So we want to be aware of that. But so going back to just your own feelings, for example, of guilt that can come up. And what I was saying with that mother, which is so hard to do but important to do, is that if you're not aware of the guilt you're carrying for something you've done towards your child or didn't do in some way, you're going to then put that burden onto your child, as I in some ways explained, but I'll get into in more details. So let's say you think, because I worked so many nights, my child gets anxious around bedtime and tantrums, or gets really upset or scared and has this fear of going to sleep because then when they wake up I'm gone, or whatever it might be, so that they're having a hard time with bedtime. So now as a parent, you've been able to change your schedule and you're staying home at bedtime, and so you go to your child, and when it's time for bedtime and they start showing these protest behaviors or acting up or whatever it might be, it triggers this feeling of guilt in you that, oh look, my child is acting in this way because of what I did to him or her. I am creating, and I've created this, and if we go forward in the catastrophic ways, I've ruined their life, I've made them anxious. What if they never sleep well? What if they never love me? What if they never can love someone? All these things might pop into your head. And so because you feel that guilt about what they're doing, it makes you put this pressure of making them stop. And so you might even get mad at them. Sometimes parents respond in this way. You see the child doing something, it makes you feel guilty because it makes you face or feel like bringing you back to the scene of your crime, so to speak, of, oh, this is what I did. and you almost get mad at your child. Well, why are you acting like this? You don't have to. Just go to sleep. You could go to sleep. And we might even blame the child. Oh, he's just acting up now, or he's manipulating me into thinking something or to try to get his way or whatever it might be. And now we blame the child for what they're going through because it's triggering these feelings and guilt in us. Every misbehavior on their part for us is like another count against us in the court of law, saying that you've done something wrong, you were a bad mom or a bad dad. And so we try to deny or avoid that feeling so strongly that we can almost force the child to not feel that way. You're making me feel guilty. That's how we can make the child feel unconsciously, usually, maybe even consciously, but probably you're unaware that you're doing that. But you'll make the child stop or try to get them to stop feeling or acting the way they can, rather than just responding to your child in that moment with what is going on, with the potential understanding of my child might have more anxiety during bedtime because of what they've experienced. But because we get focused on the guilt, or we can't get past that guilt, we can then pass that on to our child. And so as a parent, you have to deal with those feelings on your own. You have to be vigilant of how am I trying to make my child, or in some way allowing my child to take care of me emotionally, because this very often happens. One of the best books for me that illustrated this was The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller, where she explains how the gifted child is a sensitive child who is aware of their parents' emotional needs, and because of how they in some ways put that onto the child, or the child picks up on what the parent wants, they start doing things to try to take care of the parent's emotional needs. So the parent is sad or can't handle when the child gets sad, and so the child learns to hide their sadness because it doesn't make mommy or daddy feel good. And the parents might not be aware of it. They just think, oh, look, our happy kid, or our kid doesn't cry that much or something. But the child might be learning how to take care of mommy and daddy because they don't want to make them sad. Because for the child, that feels very bad to make your parents sad, makes them feel like you're disappointed in you, you're dependent on them, so if they're not okay, it can make you feel very not okay and scared. So you'd rather hide your feelings than react in a way that makes them feel bad. And of course, this is all happening on an unconscious level. The kids are not reflecting and having a powwow session with themselves where they work through all of this and come to a conclusion, you know what, let's put our sadness away. But really unconsciously, you can imagine they express a sadness, get a reaction from mom. It can almost make them anxious about expressing that feeling again. So they put it away. They see that it doesn't feel safe to express this feeling. It doesn't feel good. So I'd rather not express it. And then when we take this a step further, the child might put these feelings away because it doesn't make mommy or daddy feel good. But because they have those feelings and they know mom and dad don't like those feelings, it gives them the sense that I'm not good. Because I have these feelings, there are these parts of myself that mom and dad don't like, that make them not like me, that don't make them feel good, that make them look at me a different way. And so I have these parts that are not good. So even they might hide those parts from people and hide them from their parents, but because they know they have them, they internalize the sense that I'm bad, I'm not good, and I'm unlovable. And especially these parts of me are unlovable. So they can learn to put those feelings away as they go forward. No one's going to love these parts of me, and I have these parts that no one is going to love. So that means deep down I'm not good. So they might be afraid to get close, or in their relationships they'll hide these parts, but always know that if the person really knew, they wouldn't love them. And so we can see that just because the parents are giving the child this sense that some of their feelings are not okay because the parents can't handle it, the child ends up taking on all this burden going forward. Now, I can almost hear the irony, and when I was saying, don't be so worried about damaging your kids going forward, and then I say, if you do this, then for the rest of your life, your child is suffering in this way. So I hear that, and I can understand if it comes off like that. But I do want parents to be very aware of how much of their own emotional burden and their emotional baggage they're dumping onto their kids to carry. And if you are not conscious and mindful and aware of it, you won't be aware of what you're doing. So The Drama of the Gifted Child, I think, is a great book. Another book related to this topic would be Parenting from the Inside Out by Daniel Siegel. So it's recognizing that you have to be a good parent, you might think it's just about what you do. And a lot of parents think that, okay, what are the good behaviors, the good actions, the good techniques to use with my child? And it's very important to study these things. For sure, you want to understand those things. But you also, to parent really well, you have to know yourself from the inside. What are my issues? What are things I have? What are things I went through in my childhood? Because that can very strongly affect how you treat your child, either reinforcing or recapitulating what you have went through in some way, or doing the opposite because you don't want them to feel what you have gone through. And so we might do that. And also, what were you like with your parents? That can affect things. Or what were your parents like? And being aware of that. As we all know, people will often say, I never wanted to be like my mom or my dad. And then I realized I was doing exactly what they do, unaware to themselves. And one day you wake up and see you're doing those same things. So we have to take a really deep inventory in understanding our own childhood, our own experience as a child, our own experience with our mom and dad and what they were like, and then what things that has done to us and how that's affected us going forward with our kids. Our children are not here to in any way take on our emotional burden or baggage or to help us with our feelings. Having kids can give you some feelings that are probably the best in the world. These incredibly deep, loving, connected feelings that are beautiful. Of course, it's a lot of stress and anxiety and a lot of other feelings as well. But we want to be very aware that we're not putting any of our emotional needs on the child. Yes, it could feel good, but it's not up to them to take care of us at all. If you're doing that, even in the slightest, that's a problem. And you see it all the time in many families, of course, of any culture, but I also see it very strongly in Iranian families where the parents will make the kids feel dependent or that they're dependent on their kids to make them feel good or to take care of them. Even we'll tell our kids, mommy or daddy doesn't like that or doesn't feel good or it made me sad when you do that. And we want to be aware of using that. I know it can seem like we're trying to convey something, especially to a young child, to get them to see that. But you want to be aware of how much you're making your child feel like they have to be aware of what they do because it's going to make you feel good or feel bad or make you happy or sad in some way, that they're responsible for your feelings. So we want to be very, very aware of that because unconsciously or consciously, you're going to pass those things on to your kids. And the more aware you are and the more you work on your own issues, the less likely you are to do that. Let's go to another commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. You're listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Studio number 310-441-0555. Let's go to a caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hi, Dr. Holakouee. Am I on the air?
You are. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I have a question about my 21-year-old grandson.
Okay.
And he was living with his parents, and then they divorced, and he lived with his father in another state. And I guess they had a lot of issue together because my son was raising him and his daughter. And they were on teenage age, and while he was in medical school. And once he turned 18, my grandson left their home, and he came and stayed with me. So it's almost 3 years. When he came, he was kind of, he was lost. He was depressed.
Let me ask you, can I ask you first, what made him come stay with you? Was it because his father was in med school? Or?
Because when my son got married at age 19, and his wife actually his girlfriend got pregnant, and then he was going to one of the best schools in California. So we encouraged him to move with us to finish his school. So my son and my daughter-in-law, they moved with us, and we support them financially until they have their first kid. So my son finished school, he went to medical school, and then for his residency, he went to another state. Once he went to another state, he realized that his wife is cheating on him, and they divorced. And they never told the kids the reason of divorce, and, they still don't know, actually. So he raised the kids basically by himself in another state. And when he turned 18, he decided he cannot tolerate his dad. He wasn't getting along with him. My son was very restricted, very, when I hear when you were talking about the parents being mean, he was mean to him, really. He was young. He was 19, and, he didn't know how to be parent anyway. Right now, they have a good relationship, basically. I mean, we talk to my son, and, we help my grandson. Now, my grandson, when he came here, we sent him to therapy. He started going to therapy for about a year. And then they said that he's bipolar. So he went and he saw the psychiatrist, and then they gave him medication. So he's under medication, he's bipolar, he's taking medication, but sometimes he forgets. We still have to remind him at night, would you please don't forget to take your meds. If we forget, sometimes he forgets, sometimes he doesn't. He went to college, he's extremely smart. I mean, when he was in the middle school, they tested, he had a high IQ. But it started going down, with his grade and everything. He had no motivation. He still doesn't have any motivation. So he's taking his medication and he doesn't work. His dad paid him, small allowance. He never asked God for the money. He's not in drinking or doing drugs.
By the way, so let me stop you there. The sound is coming in. I don't know if you're on speaker because it's coming in with some feedback.
Yeah, maybe I'm talking. Is it better now?
It seems like it's a little bit better. Let's see how it is going forward. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I know he's not on drugs. He doesn't use drug at all. He doesn't drink. He's very honest, very compassionate. I mean, he has a lot of good quality. Mm-hmm. And we encourage him to, go to college. He went, he took classes. He couldn't handle it. He was more in philosophy and history, and he couldn't handle it, the stress of the school. So he dropped out. And then he started, working part-time. I have another son living in our area in San Diego. So anytime he needs help, he calls him. He goes there, he helps him, he gets paid. And we also send him to those cognitive behavior therapy for the youth, which is about 6 weeks or 8 weeks program. He went to every single class.
Now, did he want to go to therapy when you say we sent
him?
Yeah.
He likes to go to therapy, yes.
Okay.
And the other group that we sent him, it was a youth group, cognitive behavior group, which was a group therapy. They teach him how to use, they give him tools, how to move forward. And he already finished that class for 6 weeks. And he doesn't go to therapy anymore after 2 years. I mean, the therapist said, you don't need to come. You're good to go, but I don't know how he said he's good to go. He's still, he doesn't have any more anxiety. He doesn't get, that much stressed up. He's much calmer, relaxer. I think the medication he's taking is helping him. Mm-hmm. But we're stuck. We don't know what to do. I was talking.
Where are you stuck? I'm trying to understand what the problem is.
The problem is that he's not moving forward. I mean, working on and off with my other son, it's not going to make his future.
Yeah, I don't know what his future is going to be like. My concern in some of what you were sharing, as I said, was, sending him to therapy. The way you said,
No.
Seemed like
we offered him. He said yes. Even now that he stopped, he told me the other day, he said, I feel like I want to go to therapy. I said, do you want me to find it for you? He said, no, I can find it myself. I said, okay. I let it go. No,
That's
he likes to go. I mean, as soon as they started, going through divorce, I hired the therapist there in their state, and they both went, both him and his sister. They started therapy when they were age 8 and 10. So they're very familiar with this, environment. Going to therapy is not taboo for them.
Now, your situation obviously is not the standard, because usually as a grandparent, I would say you're more of a supporting role than anything, but you're more involved, it seems, at least partially, what the family wanted, but it's complicated because I do get the sense that you might be too involved in some ways, and he hasn't had some space to take on things on his own. And there's a lot of trauma, at least relationally, in his life from what you've described of his
Yes.
parents getting married so young, divorce and moving, and him having these, this bad relationship with his, not bad, but at least you mentioned he was strict and they had a pretty rough relationship, at least for a while, and with his father. So there's a lot there. And this is also what can happen when you change environments. He was in the strict environment. It seems like you don't have that same strict mindset. So he's in a different environment. And this is also why, generally speaking, when you are just overly strict and try to get someone to do something out of fear or because they have to, it doesn't really instill in them intrinsic motivation of this is what I want to do. I want to push myself forward in this way. And so it could be that now when he's out of that environment, he's just, doesn't know what to do because before everything by force he was doing or he was pushed
Even by
forward.
force, he wasn't doing it. Even by force, my son,
Yeah.
forced him to school, everything.
Yeah, and
He
force
wouldn't
doesn't
let
usually
me
work.
go,
I
he
mean,
wouldn't- never work.
Yeah.
No.
yeah,
So he
and
tried
sometimes it works. Yeah, sometimes force in the short term. I mean, it can work in the short term. I generally think it's going to lead to longer term consequences and issues with the relationship, which is what seems to happen here. So it seems like he doesn't have this inner motivation, this inner drive, and we can't really push him forward. We're hoping that it can be ignited within him, this motivation. But doing that is hard. It's not an easy thing of how do we get him to get motivated. I'm sure you've talked to him about what he wants to do. Does he ever express interest in anything or career or what he wants to
Yeah,
study?
first he was in politics. He's very, I said that he's very smart. I mean, extremely.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to history, he's amazing.
Yeah.
He went to, he was in political, in the school, in college, he was active, and then he stopped it. And then he said he wants to take the classes online, IT classes with Google. We didn't even offer him. He came to us and said, I want to do this. They charge this much, but I can get my certificate. I can work on it. He said, fine. He started. He went forward very good, and then he stopped. And we didn't ask him, why did you stop? Now, me and my husband, when we talk to each other, my husband told him, I give you time until January to finish this IT class and then get a job. If you get a job, fine. If not, then you have to move out.
Well, that you can do that. That's an option. I think I know you said we didn't ask him why. I'm okay with actually asking why in a curious way, not in a judgmental way, so we can help understand him better. What's going on? Someone who has bipolar sometimes can be impulsive, so it's possible he's impulsive, and so when it gets challenging or he doesn't like it, he just quits or gives up. So that could be going on, but we want to understand him better. So asking him why doesn't have to be something bad. It can be in a healthy way of we generally and genuinely want to know, I should say, genuinely want to understand what's going on. So, oh, you stopped going, he didn't like it or he didn't want to do it anymore. We want to understand him a little bit better. So it's not trying to make him feel bad, but we need to understand him better and help him.
Yeah, I asked him. I mean, actually, my husband sat down. My husband's clinical supervisor, and he's a counselor. So he talked to him, and he said, is there anything we can do? Do you know why you stopped doing it, or you don't continue? He said, I don't know. I lose interest. It's not important. And the other thing we noticed that he has no friends. Because when he came here, he was 18. His friends, they were all in another school. He's lonely, and we can see that he's lonely. That's why my husband offered him, we talked to him and said, why don't you go back to stay with your dad? His dad is, financially well with the doctor, and his sister is there. They're very close. He's very close with his sister. We recommended. I said, why don't you go back there? And right now that you have a good relationship with your dad, you might be able, maybe something, happen, maybe you be encouraged and your friends are there. And this door is open. Our home is available anytime you're frustrated or you cannot move on or you cannot get along with your dad. You're always welcome back here. But my concern is that he did have a couple of incidents that he want to kill himself.
Yeah, so I would be less concerned about I mean, of course, it does matter and even affects how he feels about himself. But you say he's stuck, and we're worried about that, his career and those things that they are important and they'll affect how he feels. But it seems like he's really not doing well. Like he doesn't feel good. If you're saying he doesn't have friends, he's
No.
feeling probably very alone. He's living with his grandparents. It seems like you guys really care about him, but that's obviously not ideal either. He seems to feel isolated. I'd be more concerned about how he's doing than we have to get him, in a career or something like that. And that will help him eventually, but we have to make sure he's okay. Now, I'm not sure if I heard you right that your husband told him that if he doesn't get a job, he has to leave the house.
Yeah, we told him you have to move either with your mom or with your dad.
I mean, I get the mindset. I would rather make it something more constructive with him. It could work. You're giving him an ultimatum. I'm not saying it's definitely wrong, but
No, it didn't
I
work
usually,
because it's not continuing.
yeah. And here's the thing: did you guys make him leave?
Mm, he's thinking about moving back with his dad.
Right, but my point is, this is always where if we're gonna make even if you want to make some kind of boundary like
my
that, we
husband
have
would
to
have him
be.
leave.
No, but he has left or he hasn't. I got confused. Did you already
No,
give him
he's
this?
here. He's
Right,
here
but when is he supposed to get a job by? I'm not sure if I understood.
for January.
By this coming January?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I get it, but like I said, for me, it's rather than making it this ultimatum, we're going to kick you out of the home. I'd rather try to understand what he's going through and what he wants to do. Now, you can say for us, it's not going to make sense for us to have you living here. We don't want to have you living here for free. That you can make that decision, but I think trying to just force him into working, it might not be the best way. I get the sense he's really struggling. When you said he was suicidal, when was that? How long ago?
It was about a year ago. Before
Okay.
he goes on takes the medication. Before he goes on medication.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems like he's dealing with a lot of trauma and past things, and I wouldn't. To me, kicking him out of the home is not going to be the best.
He didn't put
route.
it in that way. I mean, he didn't get that sense that we are kicking him out. He didn't get that sense from us.
Okay. Okay.
What we said is that we're going to give you until January. There's not much we can do for you. Maybe it's better you move with your mom or your dad. If you get a job here, you want to stay, that's fine. But if you didn't get a job, there is other option, and you think you should think about it. And then he went back to his dad for a week and came back. And yesterday when I was talking to him, he said his dad is mature. He said, my dad is maturing enough. I have a good relationship with him. I said, maybe it's not a bad idea. I can move back with him. He has house for his daughter, so he can stay with his sister, even with him. I mean,
Sure. And his friends are back there too.
Your friends are there, maybe because I told him, I said, we love you so much, but we are your grandparents. Even though I'm very young grandma, but still I cannot be your friend. You need your friend. So maybe by going there to be around your friend, around your dad, maybe that would help you to move on a little bit. And anytime you want to come back, so I wasn't sure if it was a good suggestion for him. Should we let him go?
It could be. I mean, I understand the suggestions, like you're saying, but at the end, we're gonna have to let him make a decision. So he should be able to live either one. He does seem stuck, so I understand your concern, but we're gonna have to help him get himself going. It means we have to talk to him more about what does he want to do, what's going on. Is it the bipolar or what he's dealing with mentally that makes it hard for him to follow through? Because whatever you want to do, you have to follow through with it or be able to keep going and going forward, and that could be hard for him. Maybe he doesn't know what he wants to do at all. Maybe he doesn't really trust himself in making the decisions. There seems to be a lot going on. It is a challenging situation. I could see how you feel stuck. He feels stuck, but you feel stuck too. And so don't put too much pressure on yourself that we have to get him so motivated and into work quickly. Even if he gets a job, it might not make a difference. He might just quit that job in a month if he doesn't like it. Yeah, right. So I mean, I get the mindset of wanting to get him going. So let's put an ultimatum or some push, but it might not make a difference. Like let's say he gets a job tomorrow and then quits after a week. I mean, it might not really impact in a positive way. So, and I also think his father has to be involved. I think it's good that you're letting him know the door is always open, you are always available, but his father needs to be involved. And I don't know if is his mother involved in his life?
His mother is here. I mean, she lives in here, and he has a good relationship with mom, but no, the mom is not. The mom is emotionally, as you know, it's very immature.
Okay. Well, so I mean, that puts we have to look at this young man. He kind of does have a tough situation he's in, from his family background to what's going on now, if he's dealing with bipolar disorder. So it's tough, and I'm not saying that means we don't expect anything from him. We definitely do, but we also want to recognize how much he's going through and not try to put extra pressure on him. We want to encourage him, but not put pressure in a negative way, and it's not always clear what that's going to look like, but being aware of not trying to force him to do something, I think will be very important. I get the sense he hasn't really explored what he wants to do enough or knows what he wants to do. And so he's 21, he's still young. I mean, normal is an interesting, word to use because what is it? What I mean is that everyone, at 21, it's definitely not, he's like old to figure out what he wants to do. People start college at 18. And so 21 is definitely not something, his life was not normal. So we shouldn't expect for him just to have the typical path of college and things that most people go through. He had a very difficult and different experience, and he might be slightly different too. If you're saying he has bipolar, that's going to affect him. So we want to help him, but don't measure him against, well, he's 21, he should be here. We want to help him feel better about himself. He was suicidal a year ago. You said a few times he's been suicidal. There's some pretty major things he's dealing with that I would make the focus more on his overall well-being than we have to just get him in work. Because
that's exactly what we are doing. That's exactly.
Okay.
I mean, that's what we always say with emotional health. It's more important, but we don't know what else we can do to help him emotionally.
Yeah, and there might be only so much, So that's what it's realizing. You're trying to support him. He needs to, of course, even when you say emotional help, if he's not wanting to get therapy or do certain things, we can't force him. We got to support him, and he's dealing with a lot, and it's challenging for the whole family. I understand, but we know he's going through it the most. So giving him that space is going to be important. If he's dealing with bipolar, we make sure he's seeing his psychiatrist, support him in that, and hopefully he goes to therapy. But it's tough to see him, I'm sure, looking stuck, and you feel stuck. But don't put that pressure on you that we have to get him. We're going to figure out a way to get him motivated starting tomorrow. It's not going to be that simple.
No,
it's going to be much bigger.
That.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, my other question is regarding his medication.
Let me, we're at a commercial break, and we're actually a little bit past. So let me answer that question after the break, okay?
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we're with the caller. Let's go back to her now. Caller, are you still there?
Yeah. I just have one question regarding his medication. Should I remind him or no? Just leave it alone.
Well, I think it's something to, again, it's about having a conversation with him about that. With bipolar, actually, in general, medication compliance we know can be an issue. With bipolar disorder, it's one of the higher ones where people don't want to take their medication. Sometimes they like the feeling they can get when they're manic or a little bit manic, so they don't want to lose that. Also, there can be side effects that make them not want to take their medication, which we can understand. So as with almost anything, it's more about having a conversation with him about that, about both sides. What is the medication like for him as far as benefits and side effects? And also, how can you, if he wants you in any way, support him in his medication
compliance? I asked him,
compliance.
and I said, do you mind if I remind you? He said, no, that's fine.
Well, but even mind is a little bit different. I would say, how would you like for me to support you in this? Mind means I want to do this. Are you okay with that? So you're asking for permission to do the thing you want, which is very different from asking him what does he want.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Does that? And I would keep that in mind. It's subtle because it's nice. You're not saying I'm going to do this, forcing him, but it might come up in other ways too. It's very common. We think it sounds very much like I'm asking. People will say, I asked my kid if they mind if I don't come tomorrow to blah, blah, blah. And the kid might feel a pressure that you don't want to come now, so they say no. Or they say it's okay, but maybe it's not what they actually want. So we say no, they're okay with it. I ask them. So we always want to be aware of making it. This is his thing. So someone, even we support each other. Someone says, "I want to start working out." It's like, great. How can I support you? Is different than I'm going to call you and make sure you're doing it. Is that okay? It's subtle, but it's still different. So I'd be aware of how you support him and making sure, especially because of you're saying you feel he doesn't really take initiative or have that motivation. We more and more want to give him the authority about things in his life. So he takes on that responsibility. It's not that grandma's going to take care of it. How do you think is the best way for you to take care of it? And grandma might be a support, but he's going to be the one making that decision.
Okay, I got it. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
Well,
so
good
much.
luck. Yeah, no, it's a tough situation you're in. I wish you the best, and especially wish the best for him too.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I think we have another line on the air. If we do, let's bring on the next caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hi, Dr. Farid.
Hi, thanks for calling.
Thank you. Thank you for your great program. My question is related to obtaining higher education in new generation. I'm a parent, and to give you a small background, since I'm coming from early childhood education field, and I worked in this field for 30 years, but currently I'm going for my second master's degree in Masters of Social Work. So I was kind of aware that I don't force my kids in getting higher grades or opposite of Persian parents. I never told them you have to be physician or lawyer, and actually I want the opposite for my personal reason. So what?
Why? Well, let me stop you there for a second. When you say you want the opposite for personal reasons, what do you mean?
Honestly, since I've been employee for 30 years and my job was in higher position, I've been under a lot of stress. So I was not able to enjoy my enjoy the nature, enjoy my surrounding, enjoy my family. I only work like machine. And I was thinking a lawyer or a physician, since my best friend is a physician. Not that if they want, they could go. But even I told them that I don't want you to be lawyer or physician because I want you to enjoy your life. That's what I told them as a joke. So
well, but obviously the joke had a meaning, and I'm not saying it was the wrong thing to do, but it's interesting. Usually we see something like, oh, that's not good, so let's do the opposite. So you're right to put this external and excessive pressure on your kids to become a doctor and a lawyer. I think is definitely bad. But then to discourage them from that doesn't mean that's necessarily good either. To say you shouldn't do this or that. But anyway, nonetheless, so that gives us a sense of where you were coming from. You didn't want to do the stereotypical. Now, maybe did you overcorrect in some way? There could have been some of that. But anyway, so you were saying, because it just struck me the way you said I wanted the opposite is why it's like if someone said, no, I understand. Well, no, in that, yeah, specifically you said it there. So I was saying, it's just like if someone says, I don't want to force my kids to get A's, so I'm actually forcing them to get F's, or pushing them to get F's. It's not necessarily healthier. But anyway, go ahead.
So whatever I meant is that I encourage them for wherever they stand, even if they got C, even if they got B, but I encourage them for next level. I never said why you didn't get A. That's what I meant,
That's good.
So
I like that.
All of this, I have noticed recently in new generation, and including my daughters, including my nephew, and they got an idea that you don't have to have higher education to have higher income or to be rich and all of that. I had a conversation with them. My daughter graduated from UC Berkeley in economics, and she got bachelor's degree last year, and after that she stopped. She told me, never talk to me about education anymore. I don't want to hear about that. My school broke me to pieces and put me in trash can, I don't know why. I know Berkeley is hard, but it is surprising for me that it's not only her and even some of her friends. They got that idea, I don't know from where, that you don't need education to have better life. So my question is, one, is this common thing in new generation? Two, is there any hope that they gonna change their mind and continue going to school?
Well, let's see. So the second one, just because you said, is there hope that they're going to change their mind? Of course, there's hope they're going to change their mind, but I don't want you to have the hope that you're going to change their mind, because
No,
then
of
you're going to
course
feel
not.
like
Yes.
you're going to put that pressure, or I have to somehow convince them. So there is that hope. Of course, they can change their mind. People go back to school and they change their goals can change, or they have a new passion, or they decide they know what they want to do. So of course they can, but because of that I don't want you to feel like it's your job to make it a
Right.
reality. So to put that pressure on them. Now, as far as people, there is you'll see things online of people saying college, maybe it's not worth it. Especially in America, how expensive it can be, and then you're going to take on debt, and you're going to take on student loans, and that's going to affect your financial life. And then lots of jobs, maybe you don't need to do this or do that. So when they say, do you need higher education? Of course, you can't. No one could say you need higher education. That wouldn't make sense. Of course, you'd have to define what you mean by need. But you can do well, and there's, of course, they can look for examples where someone has no even high school diploma, or has a diploma, or dropped out of school and is a millionaire or a billionaire, and they can say, see, you don't need. So we don't want to focus on, do you need it? We want to understand, what do you want, and what do you actually need for the life you want to have, rather than some need that everyone has to, that it's not one path for everyone, that everyone has to go to higher education, or that no one should go. It's, we have to find what's your path within that. And that's why we want to make sure that from a young age, kids are making decisions for themselves and for what they want to do, so that they keep going in the direction they want to go. But if we're pushing them, then they sometimes get to a point like, wait, I was going this way because of you. I'm not going this way anymore. And they stop, or they turn around, or they go in a completely different direction. Sometimes just to not go in the direction they felt forced to go into. So we want to be aware of that. So in the younger generation, I do see, and then also with online and social media presence of people that are talking about, I made this much money doing this, or people can get famous for doing pretty much nothing, as far as not really some kind of skill or talent, but something that's just interesting for people that they want to watch. And I guess that is a form of entertainment. I don't want to say it's nothing, but they can get the sense that I don't have to study, or even sometimes even work hard to become famous or successful or wealthy. And that can shift their mindset. We have to go to a commercial break, and I want to talk to you in the last segment some more. I want to get a better understanding, even when you said your daughter said that, broke me and threw me in the trash. So we can start with that after the break. All right. So I'm going to put you on hold and talk in a few minutes. All right. Let's go into our last commercial break. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were with the caller. Let's go back to her now. Caller, are you still there?
Yes, I am, Dr.
All right. So we were talking about your kids, especially I think you mentioned your daughter who graduated, and I was wondering, you said she felt like she was, broken and thrown into the trash, something like that. Very much she had a bad experience, it seemed like, in her undergraduate, and made her not want to continue her studies. Did she tell you what she meant by that, or why she felt that way?
No, when my husband and I were talking to her about going for a master's degree, she was she was mad and said, you know what happened to me? My school broke me to pieces and put me in trash. That's all she said. And she said, I don't want you to talk about my education anymore. And that's it. 1 year is passed, and we never talked to her, because I know her.
Okay.
If she said she doesn't want to talk about something, she would not.
Okay.
Honestly, my impression is maybe she meant it was too hard for her, because she was only average student. She was
Okay.
not very, I don't know.
Well, if she went to
So-
Berkeley, she probably wasn't average. But let me ask, but here's the thing that's surprising, is that if you're saying she told you this after she graduated, so she must have been unhappy or struggling during, but she never, I guess, either never told you, or you guys never really heard it. How did that happen, that she went through her whole undergraduate seemingly saying like she was miserable, and then you guys didn't find out until you asked her about graduate school?
She's kind of like my husband. She doesn't express herself that much. She tries to solve her own problems. Like my younger one, character is totally different. But she's in social work and psychology, those things, and she's going for protests with people and those things. But my older one is like my husband and never expresses her things to us. And she has very limited communication with us. And so we leave her alone, and whenever she wants to talk to us, she comes to us.
Okay.
Right now, she's very happy. She says her own friend who graduated with her at Berkeley, she got a full-time job. She's going, and she said that she's not happy in her life, but I am happier right now. She made her own website. She's selling nature crystals and those things that is not related to her education. But, realize that she wants everything to be fun. She wants everything to make her happy. If it's not, she doesn't accept it. That's what I realized. I don't know how to explain.
Well, maybe I get what you're saying, at least that's your understanding of it. And so people, of course, have different personalities, different communication styles, and the amount they're going to express things. So I could see your two kids being different, and it doesn't mean we should expect her to say as much as your younger child. But at the same time, we always want to be aware when we look at communication that it's a two-way street. So someone might be less forthcoming with information and wanting to share and opening up, but we always want to look at how comfortable are we making it for them to talk to us or open up with us or share things with us. And I do get the sense that you want things to be a certain way, or you feel an anxiety if they're not. And so it might make it hard for her to tell you things that she thinks you won't like.
Yes, you are partially right. Even I tried not to interfere, but I know I did sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's my concern when you say she, when she graduated, we found out she hated school. Seems like, that's 4 years where she seems to have been unhappy, or at least didn't like it. And if you guys didn't know, that's telling us something. Again, I'm not putting that all blame on you and her father.
Yes.
Yeah. So we want to see what's missing in the communication. It could definitely be her style. But, even when you said I was worried they wouldn't enjoy their life. And it's interesting, the way you're describing her, you might be now concerned she's focusing too much on just enjoying life and not taking it seriously enough. And so this is where, when I was saying before, when we sometimes go to the other extreme, it's not necessarily healthy. And I'm not saying that's how your child is, but there could be some elements of that you were so focused on. Don't get, bogged down by work and school. Make sure you're enjoying. And she maybe got too much of that message of like only enjoy and don't. But we don't know if that's really how she is. I don't know, but that's something you brought up. So we're gonna have to obviously let her, as is always the case, find her path. But rather than just focusing on her career, and you said, oh, she's doing work that's not part of her education or what she studied, I would, as I always encourage parents, focus on your relationship with her more than her performance. Parents often feel like they're their child's academic and then career advisors and counselors and managers, and that can be a part of course, your role as a parent in different ways when the child is developing. But you also want to make sure you're focused on your relationship with them. A lot of parents only talk to their kids about education and then later on work stuff. Like there's not much
She told me
left.
that. She told me that. Years ago, she told me, you only give advice. You only talk about work and school. And I know that. And even my therapist told me the same thing that you are telling me, that I have to work on my relationship with her. And recently I'm trying that.
Good.
And the good thing is my two daughters, since younger age, they had their own therapist. So they know what they are doing. So I don't have concern with that. But maybe the concern is myself and my anxiety. And I'm afraid maybe I'm not doing my job as a parent. So my children are going to stay uneducated. I don't know.
Well, and that's okay. Even you say, uneducated doesn't have to be. First of all, she graduated from Berkeley, so I doubt anyone would characterize that as uneducated. But, when anxiety usually translates as behavior into control. So when we have anxiety, then we're trying to control her into getting her into school or to changing her mindset. So it's good you have that awareness and you're recognizing that, and I'm glad she shared that with you. And a lot of parents, they have that feeling that I'm supposed to just get them happy, and by happy it means successful, and then my job is done. And your most important job is to have an emotional connection and relationship with her,
Right.
and focus on that. And she even said you give advice, so that's something also to be mindful of when we go back to she doesn't tell me anything. Well, she might feel that if she opens up a conversation, it's going to become one way, that she's just going to listen to you. And usually if it feels that way, it means you're being a little bit forceful with how you're presenting it, that she has to agree with you.
I know.
So we want to try to be aware of that and try to, it'll take time to change that dynamic, both because it's going to be hard for you to make that change, and two, also because she's going to have a hard time really accepting that change or being comfortable with it. But I hope you can look at that as a type of goal or an aspiration to move towards, of how can I have a more open dialogue. And I say dialogue because if it's dialogue, both people are talking. If it's one person talking, that's a monologue, which is maybe what you are having with her, where we hear what she has to say. Where what does she think about this? And we want to be open to it. Not, okay, let me hear what she has to say about why she didn't like school, but I know at the end I'm going to try to get her to see that she should go back to school. Because that's also not an open conversation. That's a conversation with a clear agenda that the person will likely pick up on and then not want to talk to us anymore. So I would even have conversations with her about this, acknowledging and recognizing the ways you've communicated. And eventually you can express to her, of course, it was coming from a place that you cared about her, you loved her, you wanted the best for her, but you realized that you didn't always leave her the space to be her own person, and you didn't always leave her the space in your communication to be a full person, to say, Mom, this is what I think, even if it was something you don't like, or Mom, let me explain to you what I feel about this, and giving her that space that even if it wasn't what you liked, for her to feel or think whatever she felt or think.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Farid.
Sure. Good luck. Nice talking to you.
Thank you. Nice talking to you, too. Bye-bye.
Take care. All right. We just have a few minutes left, and so I'll kind of carry on some of those thoughts in that discussion. It's tough as a parent when we care so much about our kids and what happens to them, and we have some ideas of what a good life or a successful life is going to be. And one of the things I see so commonly with parents is they turn into academic managers. I work with them in therapy, and all they're reporting to me is, okay, she didn't do this homework or this assignment, but she's behind in this class, and I told her she has to do this, and I know she has this essay due in 2 weeks. And you realize there's almost nothing other than the academic life of their child they think that they're responsible for, that they should be focusing on. And I always try to encourage parents to see that that's really one aspect of being a parent. Of course, you have to be aware of your child's education, but more than anything, you are their mother or their father, meaning you have a relationship with them. So we have to take a step back and see, what am I doing here, or what am I trying to do as a parent, and what can I do to make sure I create that bond with them? And the other point that came up was about communication. And people do have very different temperaments, different communication styles, different amounts that they like to be open and share in general. We all can have differences and be variable on those types of issues. But at the same time, as I said to her, we always want to be mindful of how easy am I making it, especially as a parent, because that is a relationship that has a power differential, meaning you're in a position of power, and so it can make it a lot easier or harder for your kid to communicate to you based on what you do and say and how you interact. So we want to see, how easy and comfortable am I making it for my child to share their perspective, even when it does not agree with what I like or what I think. That's a genuine conversation, means I'm allowing the space for you to think and feel what you think and feel, even if it is different from what I think and feel. That means it's open. If it's as soon as you say something I don't like, you feel that I'm trying to convince you otherwise, or I tell you you're wrong, or I go into a lecture where I'm going to explain for 10, 15 minutes why the way you think is wrong, well, now we're not having open conversations, and we can understand that over time, the person is going to want to tell us less. If each time I tell you my opinion on something, you tell me for 10 minutes why I'm wrong and bad and this is the right way, I'm going to be less likely to share my opinions with you. And of course, if there's elements of judgment in it where you make me feel like you think I'm bad or I'm doing something bad and I shouldn't think this way, well, then even more, of course, it's less likely that that person will want to communicate with you. So we have to always check with that. People will tell me, oh, my daughter or my son doesn't say anything to us. And teenagers will start telling you less. We should be ready for that. They want to confide in their peers more. They care more about what their peers have to say. It's a pretty natural part of their development where they're going to turn more towards them. But at the same time, we want to be aware of how we are doing as far as creating the environment for them to communicate with us. Do I allow them the space to disagree? And that can be tough. Sometimes we think we know what's the best thing for someone. They need to start studying some more. So let me make sure that's where we get to. And that's another thing I mentioned to her, that we have to be mindful of the agenda we have going into a conversation, because that also means we're not having an open dialogue. If I say I want to talk to you, but at the end I want to make sure you do what I think you should do, we're really not having a conversation. We're having me pretending to have a conversation, but trying to make sure I get my way. And even if it's get my way in what you do, which I think is for your benefit, it still is going to affect the openness of that communication and dialogue, where you're not going to feel that you have really a chance to share your side. So as parents, we have a lot more power in the relationship. We have to be aware of that and recognize that that means we have even more power to influence the type and style and amount of communication we have. We never can nor should we force our kids or teenagers to talk to us, but we want to be aware that we have a lot of influence over how those conversations go and how our communication style is. All right, well, that brings us to the end of today's show. As always, a big thank you to Ghazal in the studio for allowing me to do the show remotely. The book of the week for this week, again, is The Life You Can Save by Peter Singer, How to Do Your Part to End World Poverty. Looking forward to reading that and sharing it with you on Monday's show. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. Have a wonderful day.